Welcome to our show. Today, we're exploring what truly makes for a long and fulfilling life, inspired by a conversation between Harvard professor Robert Waldinger and Simon Sinek on a bit of optimism. Waldinger, who's led a remarkable 75-year study on happiness, highlights that genuine connections with others and staying physically healthy often matter more than the pursuit of wealth or status. He shows us that having a purpose, one that can shift as we grow, and fostering meaningful relationships are the true cornerstones of a life well lived. In an age of digital convenience, their dialogue prompts us to think hard about what community really means. It's a call to refocus on authentic bonds and real-world values. Using several AI tools, I have summarized out the key points discussed by these two respectable gentlemen on the topic and present to you in podcast format for ease of listening and understanding. Do sit back and enjoy and learn from their wisdom.
All right, everyone get ready, because today we're going to really dig deep into something fascinating. The science of happiness.
Ooh, I like it.
We're going to take apart a conversation between Simon Sinek
Yeah.
and Dr. Robert Waldinger.
You know Sinek from Start With Why, of course.
Of course.
And Dr. Waldinger is the director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development, which is one of the longest-running studies on happiness that's ever been done.
That's incredible.
He's a psychiatrist, and he kind of just stumbled into leading this study.
Wow, what a lucky
Yeah, total accident. He's been spending the last 22 years going over all this data, trying to figure out what makes a fulfilling life.
I can only imagine the insights that he's come up with over those 22 years.
Oh, yeah.
So for our deep dive today, we are going to pull out the best parts of this conversation and figure out how you can use this knowledge to build a happier life.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about this study is that it's not just theoretical.
Right.
It gives us practical takeaways.
I love that.
And one of the biggest surprises is how much of what we think we know about happiness is just wrong.
Okay.
Like money and fame, for example.
And we're always told, if we just had more money or if we were more famous, that we would finally be happy.
Right.
Is that actually true?
Well, the Harvard study found something pretty interesting.
Okay.
Money does matter.
Ooh.
To a point, it matters when it comes to meeting your basic needs. Having a roof over your head, having food on the table.
Of course.
But after you reach a certain point, it stops having a big impact on your happiness.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can think of it like this. Once you're comfortable having 10 times more money, doesn't necessarily make you 10 times happier.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about fame?
Yeah.
Do people crave that kind of recognition?
It's tempting to think so, right?
Yeah.
But the study actually found that fame can be a double-edged sword.
Okay, how so?
So celebrities, even though they often have these huge social circles.
Yeah, I was going to say like the entourages and all that stuff.
Yeah, they actually report higher levels of loneliness and isolation than the average person.
Why is that? I always thought those massive entourages were full of, like, their best friends.
I know it seems counterintuitive, right?
It does.
But being under constant scrutiny and pressure to maintain their image and the lack of genuine connection can really take its toll.
So they're never really able to be themselves.
It's like they're always on stage, never able to let their guard down.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if money and fame aren't the keys to happiness, like we all thought,
Right.
what does the study say is important?
Well, one thing that came up over and over again as a strong predictor of happiness is deep, meaningful connections.
Okay, so not just like, a huge network of acquaintances.
No.
Not just tons of Facebook friends.
No, not at all.
Right.
It's about those relationships where you feel really seen and understood and supported.
Okay.
The kind where you can be your true self completely and still feel loved.
That's beautiful.
Dr. Waldinger actually shared a story about how he realized he had been neglecting his friendships. He was so focused on work that he wasn't making time for the people who mattered most.
Did he talk about how he turned that around? Because I think that's something a lot of us struggle with.
Yeah, he realized that he had to be more intentional about his relationships.
Okay.
He started making an effort to connect with friends more regularly, even if it felt a little awkward at first.
That's great to hear that it can actually be that simple.
And it made a huge difference in his overall happiness.
I love that. So it's a good reminder that we really do have to make time for those connections.
Absolutely.
Even when life feels chaotic.
Definitely.
What does the study say about finding your purpose?
Oh, yeah.
Is that important too?
Absolutely. Dr. Waldinger noticed that young people who were really focused on making a difference in the world
Yeah.
tended to be happier and more engaged in life.
So it wasn't just going through the motions. Their work actually had meaning to them.
Exactly. Their work was fueled by something bigger than themselves.
Wow, I love that.
And this ties into a psychological concept called generativity.
Generativity. Okay.
It's that stage in life where you start to focus on contributing to the well-being of others and future generations.
So it's about leaving a positive mark on the world.
That's a great way to put it. And the people who held on to this idea of making a difference,
Okay.
they tended to maintain that sense of purpose throughout their lives.
Wow.
It wasn't just youthful idealism, it actually became a driving force for their long-term happiness.
So I'm curious, what did these people actually do to make a difference?
Well-
What actions did they take?
One of the most interesting things that came up was that they didn't just stick to one group.
Okay.
They actually made an effort to mix things up.
Okay.
They would host gatherings and invite friends from work and family members and people from their religious community.
Oh, that's great.
All these different personalities and backgrounds.
So they're actively breaking down those social silos that we tend to get stuck in.
Exactly.
I thought that.
It's about expanding our circles and creating opportunities for these unexpected connections.
I love that idea. So instead of just hanging out with our usual crew,
Right.
we should be mixing it up a little bit and inviting new people in.
It's definitely something to think about, and it all comes back to that core need for connection.
I love that.
And speaking of connection,
Okay.
there's another powerful concept that Dr. Waldinger brought up.
Okay.
The importance of time as a gift.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What's so special about time?
Well, he shared this really profound quote from one of his Zen teachers.
Okay.
Attention is the most basic form of love.
Wow.
And when you think about it,
Yeah.
in our world where we're constantly connected and always on,
Always on.
giving someone your full attention
Right.
is a really rare and precious gift.
You're so right. We are so bombarded with distractions these days. It's really hard to stay present and engage with the people that we care about.
And that's where mindfulness comes in.
Oh,
Being aware of where we're directing our attention and making conscious choices about how we spend our time.
So it's not just about the amount of time that we spend with someone, but the quality of that time.
Exactly.
So-
It's about putting down our phones, silencing our notifications, and truly being present in the moment.
It's about actively listening and empathizing and showing the people in our lives that we care.
That's the heart of it, and it's something we can all work on doing more of starting today.
I love it. Now, before we move on, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind during this conversation. We've talked about running towards things that bring us fulfillment.
Yeah,
But what about those times when we need to run away from things that are draining us?
that's a great point, and it's something that the study talks about, too.
Okay.
It's not always about chasing some big ideal. Sometimes it's about knowing what's not working in our lives and having the courage to walk away.
I think that can be hard sometimes
Oh, yeah.
to admit when something's not serving us.
Especially if you've put a lot of time and energy into it.
Yeah.
But sometimes letting go is the best thing you can do for yourself. And it opens up space for something even better.
So it's not just about going after what we love, but also about letting go of what's no longer serving us.
Exactly. It's about creating a life that aligns with our values and goals.
I love that.
Both in terms of what we embrace and what we choose to let go of.
That's a great point. I think that's a perfect place to pause. For now, we've covered so much.
Yeah.
From the surprising truths about money and fame to the importance of connection and purpose and the power of being present.
Yeah.
When we come back, we'll dig a little deeper into some of the details of finding passion and those little glimmers of joy that make life fulfilling.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. Welcome back to the deep dive. So let's pick up where we left off with this whole idea of letting go of things that no longer serve us.
Okay.
It's really easy to fall into this trap where we're just running away from what we dislike
Yeah.
without really knowing what we're running towards.
Right, like quitting your job because you hate it, but not knowing what you're going to do next.
Exactly. And Dr. Waldinger actually had a perfect example about this. He talked about how when he was younger, he was super passionate about theater.
Oh, interesting. Did he want to be an actor?
He did, but when he really sat down and thought about it, considered all the ups and downs of a career in theater, you know, the constant auditions, the competition, the unpredictable lifestyle,
Yeah.
he realized it just wasn't the right fit for him.
So he loved the idea of it,
Yeah,
but when he was faced with the reality,
right.
he knew it wasn't actually what he wanted.
That's a great way to put it. It's like, We need to be honest with ourselves about what a path really looks like,
Yeah.
not just the fantasy version in our heads.
That makes a lot of sense. And sometimes that honesty leads us to make some really tough choices.
It does.
Like, even though Dr. Waldinger loved theater,
Mm.
he decided to go in a different direction.
He did, and it says a lot about him.
It does.
You know, that self-awareness and willingness to put his long-term well-being first.
Yeah.
And that's a really valuable lesson for everyone. It's okay to change your mind, to adjust your sails as you grow.
Right. It's like they say the only constant is change.
Exactly.
What we thought we wanted 5 years ago might be completely different from what we want now.
Totally. And that actually connects perfectly with another big takeaway from the study.
Okay.
The importance of those glimmers of joy that we talked about earlier.
Yes, the idea that our jobs and relationships don't have to be pure bliss all the time,
Right.
but there should be these little sparks of joy.
Exactly. And those glimmers can be big or small. They can be things like finishing a big project at work or seeing your kid take their first steps.
Or they can be like a good cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Or a funny conversation with a friend. A peaceful walk in nature.
Right. It's all about being present enough to actually notice those moments.
Yeah.
And really appreciate them.
I love that it's like training ourselves to find the joy in the little things, even amidst all the craziness of life.
Exactly. And, you know, Dr. Waldinger told the story about a construction worker who found so much satisfaction in his job.
Really, even though it was hard work.
Even though it was really physically demanding and a lot of it was repetitive.
Wow.
He just loved seeing those tangible results of his work. You know, being able to point to a building and say, I built that.
So it wasn't the work itself that he loved,
Right.
but what that work produced.
Exactly. It's a really important distinction, finding passion in the labor versus finding passion in the results of that labor.
I never thought about it like that, but
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not about loving every single minute of what we do,
Yeah.
but understanding how it contributes to something bigger.
Exactly. Think about raising kids.
Okay.
It's supposed to be one of the most fulfilling things in life.
Right.
But it's also incredibly challenging.
Oh, absolutely. Those sleepless nights, the tantrums, the teenage angst.
Yeah, it's not all sunshine and roses.
Definitely not.
But even with all of that, parents still find joy in those moments of connection with their kids. Those little bursts of laughter, the milestones that make all the hard work worth it.
So it's about focusing on those long-term rewards.
Exactly.
The impact we have on other people's lives.
Right.
Rather than getting bogged down in the day-to-day.
And that shift in perspective can apply to anything in life.
Okay.
Think about writing a book. It's a long and difficult process.
It is.
Full of self-doubt and tons of rewriting.
Right?
But holding that finished book in your hands, knowing you created something that could actually impact other people's lives,
Yeah.
that's got to feel amazing.
It does. It's about remembering that even the toughest things we do have those little sparks of joy sprinkled throughout.
Yeah, and it's those glimmers that keep us going when things get hard.
Totally. They're like finding little nuggets of gold
Yes.
in a giant pile of dirt.
Exactly, and they make the whole process worth it now. Before we wrap up this part of the deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to go back to something we were talking about earlier about making a difference in the world.
Okay. It seems like that's a common theme in a lot of this happiness research.
It really is, and it relates to this idea of idealism that Dr. Waldinger talked about.
Idealism.
Okay.
That's a concept that can be both inspiring and kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it pushes us to want a better world,
Right.
but it can also lead to disappointment
Mhm.
if we set our expectations too high.
That's a really good point. Idealism is all about striving for something that we may never fully achieve.
Like world peace.
Yeah.
Or ending poverty.
Exactly. Those are amazing goals.
They are.
But they're also really complex and hard to achieve.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
Right.
It's that desire to make the world better that drives progress. It's what inspires us to be better people.
So it's not about being perfect, but about the journey itself.
Exactly. It's about celebrating the little victories along the way, the
Yeah.
things that show us we're moving towards a more just and fair world. And it's about finding joy in the work itself.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we hold on to that sense of idealism in a way that feels motivating and also realistic?
It starts with figuring out what causes or issues really speak to you.
Mhm.
The things that light you up and make you want to take action.
It's like finding our why.
Exactly. And once we've found our why, it's about getting involved in a way that feels meaningful.
Okay, so that could be volunteering our time,
Yeah.
donating to a cause,
Right.
speaking out against injustice,
Mm-hmm.
or even just using our skills to contribute to our community.
Exactly. And it's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about doing something no matter how big or small and celebrating those efforts along the way.
That's a beautiful message.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that we all have the power to make a difference. And it's all of our efforts together, all those acts of kindness and compassion that create a better world.
No, there's one last thing from the study that I think ties this all together.
Okay.
It's that idea of time as a gift that we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah, about how giving someone our attention is a form of love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dr. Waldinger talked about how rare it is these days to give someone our full attention. We have so many distractions pulling us in different directions.
Like our attention has become something to buy and sell.
Yeah.
We're always multitasking, checking our phones, scrolling through social media.
It's true. It's so hard to disconnect and just be present.
It really is. But that's why it's so important to be mindful of how we spend our time and our attention.
Absolutely.
To make an effort to put down our phones, turn off the TV, and really be with the people we care about.
Right, to create those special moments
Yeah.
where we can connect without the distractions of the outside world.
It's about listening and empathizing and showing the people in our lives that they're important to us.
Exactly. It's about making them feel seen and heard and valued. And that's something we can all work on.
I love that. I think that's a great place to end this part of the deep dive. We've explored so many great ideas.
We have.
From those surprising truths about money and fame to the importance of connection and purpose and the power of just being present.
Yep.
When we come back, we'll finish up our discussion with some final thoughts on how to take these ideas and actually apply them to our own lives to create a future full of meaning and joy. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've talked a lot about happiness already,
We have.
but there's one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's time we address the elephant in the room.
You read my mind. We got to talk about fame.
We do.
It seems like we're always seeing these pictures of celebrities living these amazing lives.
Right.
But the Harvard study found that it's not as simple as it looks.
Definitely not. Fame can be really tricky.
So what did the study say about how fame affects happiness?
Well, one of the biggest downsides is the loss of privacy.
Right. You're constantly in the spotlight.
Exactly. Celebrities are always under a microscope. Their every move is analyzed.
It must be so exhausting to feel like you can never just relax and be yourself,
Yeah, and there's all this pressure to keep up a certain image.
to live up to everyone's expectation.
Exactly, and avoid anything that could hurt their reputation.
So it's no wonder that so many celebrities struggle with things like anxiety and burnout.
Yeah, and here's another interesting thing.
Okay.
Even though they usually have a ton of people around them.
And the entourage is the fan.
And exactly. A lot of celebrities actually say they feel isolated and lonely.
Really?
Yeah.
I always thought being surrounded by people would help with that.
You would think so, but what the study found is that it's not about how many connections you have.
Okay.
It's about the quality of those connections.
That makes sense. When you're famous, it must be hard to know who your real friends are.
It is. It can be tough to figure out who genuinely likes you for you.
Yeah. And who's just there for the fame and fortune.
Exactly. And that lack of genuine connection can make you feel really lonely even when you're surrounded by people.
It's like that saying you can be lonely in a crowd.
Exactly. So I think this highlights something we've been talking about this whole time.
Okay.
Real happiness comes from within.
It's not about what other people think of you
No.
or how much money you have.
Right. It's about finding peace and purpose in those little moments of joy in your own life.
I love that.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Harvard study,
Yeah.
let's go over the key takeaways one more time.
Sounds good.
First, we learned that money and fame aren't the keys to happiness like we might think.
No.
Having enough money for your basic needs is important, of course.
Of course.
But after that, it doesn't really make you that much happier.
Right. And fame often comes with a lot of problems that can actually make you feel worse.
We also learned how important strong social connections are for happiness.
Yeah. And it's not just about having a ton of friends.
It's about having those deep, meaningful relationships.
Exactly, where you feel supported and understood.
And we talked about how important it is to have a sense of purpose.
Yes. Something that gives your life meaning.
And we explored the power of those glimmers of joy in everyday life.
Learning to appreciate those little moments.
And finally, we discussed how important it is to be present.
Yes.
To really give people our full attention.
Which is like giving them a gift.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's amazing to think that a study that started over 80 years ago
I know.
is still so relevant today.
And it gives me hope
Me too.
that we really can create lives full of connection and meaning and joy.
Absolutely. So as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with one question to think about.
Okay.
What's one small thing you can do today to move towards a happier, more meaningful life.
Maybe it's calling a friend
Yeah.
or spending a few minutes being grateful.
Or just taking some time to be quiet and reflect.
The journey to happiness isn't about making these big, sudden changes.
It's about those little steps we take every day.
And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
I hope you found this exploration as interesting as I did. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep diving deep.